The screen fades in on a rain-soaked airfield somewhere in England, 1940. Wind batters tin roofs, floodlights buzz and flicker, and across the night sky the distant thrum of approaching engines grows louder. Ground crews scramble, commanders shout clipped orders, and every life within miles holds its breath as Luftwaffe bombers close in. But deep inside a nondescript operations hut, a young technician, not a general, not a decorated officer, not someone history will remember by name, leans over a flickering screen filled with glowing green waves. His hand trembles as he adjusts a dial. No medals, no spotlight, no recognition. And yet, the information he is decoding in that moment will save thousands of lives and change the course of the war. This is where the story really begins, not with the men whose names line the spines of history books, but with the countless undiscovered inventors who stood in the wings, unseen. The people whose work was so classified, so secret, or so overshadowed that even decades later, most of the world has no idea they existed. But without them, the Battle of Britain might have ended differently. Penicillin might never have reached wounded soldiers in time. Breaking the Enigma code might have taken years longer, costing millions more lives. The world you live in today, from your medicines to your digital networks to the radar guns that measure traffic speed, might never have taken shape at all. Forget everything you think you know about World War II technology. The war's most crucial breakthroughs were not always conceived by the celebrated scientific superstars like Alan Turing, Robert Oppenheimer, or Wernher von Braun. Instead, many came from unknown figures laboring in quiet corners of the war machine, drafting ideas on chalkboards, soldering components in dim workshops, pacing sleepless in code rooms while the world teetered on the brink of collapse. These were men and women who never sought fame, never expected glory, and never imagined that their inventions would become foundations of the modern age. Yet their genius turned the gears of history when humanity needed it most. Picture this. You're standing in a small workshop in 1941. The room smells of metal filings and hot circuitry. Tools lie scattered across a rough wooden workbench. A low hum fills the room. The inventor at work here will never command troops, never address a nation, never appear on a propaganda poster. And yet, the device he's painstakingly soldering together over long nights will one day become a crucial component of early radar, or a new computing relay switch, or a system that allows Allied ships to navigate through submarine-infested waters. No journalist will ever interview him. No statue will ever honor him. But the world will benefit from his mind long after the war has ended. Or imagine a cramped room at Bletchley Park. No windows, dim light, rows of desks, papers stacked in chaotic towers. Women who are never even told the true importance of their assignments spend endless hours studying coded transmissions. Names like Mavis Beatty, unknown to most of the world, stare at encrypted German Navy traffic and slowly, with patience and brilliance, unlock patterns that help sink enemy fleets before they can fire a shot. They go home every night having done more to shorten the war than many of the officers who delivered orders on the battlefield. But when the war ends, they simply sign non-disclosure agreements and return quietly to civilian life. No applause, no fame, just silence. This isn't the version of history most people grew up with. The traditional narrative focuses on the large names, the towering figures, the celebrated scientists whose reputations survived the war. But World War II was won not by individuals, but by networks of innovators, people whose contributions were never intended to see the spotlight. Some were junior engineers, some were lab technicians, some were women brought in because men were away fighting. Others were immigrants and refugees banned or marginalized in their homelands, but welcomed into Allied laboratories where their ideas helped turn the tide. And here's the shocking truth. The inventions they developed didn't disappear when peace was declared. They became the building blocks of the world we inhabit today. The computers you use, the medicines that save lives, the communication systems that knit the planet together, the production lines that feed, equip, and sustain entire societies. Their fingerprints are everywhere, hidden in plain sight. Yet when we talk about innovation in wartime, the spotlight rarely turns toward these anonymous visionaries. Why? Because they didn't publish books afterward. They didn't appear in newsreels. Their contributions were often classified for decades. And by the time their work finally became public, the world had already moved on. So the question stands, how much of the story of World War II is missing? How many scientific revolutions were sparked in laboratories by people history never remembered? And what would our understanding of the war look like if we resurrected their stories and placed them back where they belong? This video steps into the shadows of innovation, peeling back the layers of forgotten history to reveal the unsung geniuses whose inventions shaped not just the outcome of World War II, but the world that came after. Their stories have waited long enough. Now it's time to tell them. The story opens in the tense summer of 1940. On a lonely stretch of coastline in Dorset, a newly constructed chain of tall steel towers stares out across the English Channel. To the untrained eye, they look like nothing more than oversized radio masts. They hum faintly in the early morning air, catching sea breezes and whipping gulls as RAF operators yawn and settle into another shift. The world does not know it yet, but these metal towers, and the minds behind them, are about to steal from the Luftwaffe the element of surprise. And one of the key architects of this technological miracle is not a celebrated engineer, not a knighted scientist, but a quiet civil servant named Arnold Wilkins. Few outside his office even know his name. Inside the underground station that processes the signals from the towers, young operators sit before oscilloscope screens glowing with jagged green lines. They drink lukewarm tea, blink through exhaustion, and listen to distant propellers echo through the channel mist. A blip appears on the screen, small but unmistakable. A squadron of German bombers has crossed the French coast. Air raid alarms begin sounding minutes later, giving British fighter pilots something unheard of in the history of aerial warfare. Warning. Time. A fighting chance. Thousands of lives are saved, not because of Churchill's speeches or frontline heroism, but because of a handful of engineers working in obscurity, building the world's first operational radar network. This is where the question demands to be asked. How many turning points in World War II were decided not by generals or admirals, but by individuals whose contributions never made the history books? The familiar narrative of the war tends to highlight the most visible figures, the charismatic leaders, the strategic commanders, the world-famous scientists given photo spreads in newspapers. But the technological architecture of the war was vast, interconnected, and deeply collaborative. For every headline name, there were often dozens of contributors whose innovations were just as pivotal, but whose recognition was swallowed by classification, wartime secrecy, or simple historical oversight. Robert Watson Watt, for example, is widely credited as the father of British radar. His name appears in documentaries, textbooks, and official histories. But in the early stages, it was Wilkins who made the conceptual leap that radio waves bouncing off aircraft could provide not just detection, but precise range measurement. He performed the experiments that proved the method worked. He designed the practical framework that radar operators used every day of the war. And Watson Watt himself maintained that Wilkins was the real visionary behind the breakthrough. Yet even that is only part of the story. Radar was not a single invention. It was 1,000 small engineering victories stacked on top of each other. The operators who spent endless nights tracking the quality of signals. The women stationed as plotters who translated raw radar data into operational maps. The technicians who repaired broken transmitters in blackout conditions, rain hammering the roof above them. Without any one of these low-profile specialists, radar could have failed, and the Battle of Britain might have ended very differently. This becomes the central idea of the narrative. World War II was not won by heroes alone. It was won by invisible networks of problem solvers, solving problems nobody had ever faced before. Their labs were damp basements, requisition barns, and makeshift mobile units packed with spare parts and soldering irons. They worked in complete secrecy, knowing that their success would be measured not in medals but in survival. And these overlooked figures existed everywhere across the war effort. In every military laboratory, every naval research station, every medical testing facility, every engineering college converted into wartime production centers, minds were racing to solve problems at a scale humanity had never encountered. How do you keep fleets supplied across thousands of miles of open ocean? How do you prevent wounded soldiers from dying of infection? How can encrypted communication be transmitted across continents faster than the enemy can decode it? Every one of these challenges brought forth innovations that would outlive the war by decades. But because history is written in bold strokes, chronologies, speeches, battlefield triumphs, these quiet figures vanish into the margins. Their stories lie in dusty engineering reports, declassified memos, and notebooks filled with hand-drawn diagrams and coffee stains. And yet, the results of their work define the blueprint of the modern world. Imagine being one of them, sitting in a converted workshop long after midnight, rubbing your eyes behind thick lenses as you draw yet another schematic of a new antenna array. Nobody will ever interview you. No one will carry your photograph in their wallet. Soldiers on the front line will never know your name. But when radar gives them warning that the enemy is coming, they will live because of you. Maybe they'll go home after the war. Maybe they'll hold their grandchildren, and they'll never know who to thank. This is the emotional weight of the unsung innovator. World-changing contributions delivered without applause. Solutions crafted under enormous pressure, often at personal sacrifice, with no expectation of glory. For many of these figures, their inventions were so classified that they weren't even allowed to discuss their achievements with their own families. Some died before the true scale of their work was ever revealed. So as we step deeper into this story, a new perspective emerges. The history you know is not wrong. It's simply incomplete. Behind every famous accomplishment lies a constellation of unknown minds whose brilliance made the impossible possible. And now it is time to walk down into the bunkers, the workshops, the code rooms, and the laboratories where these unknown heroes built the tools that reshaped the war and the world. Fog clings to the rolling fields outside London as the first pale light of dawn brushes the horizon. In a small laboratory tucked beneath the hill, a team of engineers bends over tangled circuits, oscilloscopes, and patchy wiring that hums with possibility. Robert Watson Watt paces the room, clipboard in hand, yet it's the quiet work of his assistants, the unnoticed minds, that carries the day. Arnold Wilkins sits hunched over a measuring device, the glow of the cathode tube reflecting in his glasses as he adjusts a dial with a trembling hand. Every minor tweak is a gamble. Every miscalculation could mean the difference between a city defended and a city burning under bombs. The invention they are nurturing, early radar, is already shaping the war's outcome, but the public, the history books, will largely forget them. Radar's story is often told through Watson Watt's name, but the reality is far more complex. It was a team effort, a tapestry of intelligence, creativity, and relentless experimentation. Wilkins, in particular, devised the radiolocation principle that made radar a practical weapon, taking theoretical physics and translating it into something operational under the constant threat of invasion. His contribution was invisible to the wider world, but it was critical. Without his experiments, without the painstaking calibration of early detection systems, the Luftwaffe could have flown with near impunity over Britain, and the Battle of Britain might have been a disaster. Down in the underground plotting rooms, young women sit before large maps, markers in hand, eyes darting from radar screens to charts. They convert abstract signals into actionable intelligence, silently carrying the weight of the nation on their shoulders. One flick of a pencil, one shift in a blip's position, could reroute squadrons of fighter pilots in time to intercept enemy aircraft. These operators are, in many ways, the final link between theory and reality, the human component that transforms signals into strategy. Yet few will ever know their names. Few will ever see their contribution etched into history, although their work literally shaped the skies over England. The early radar sets themselves were rudimentary by modern standards, huge, temperamental, and prone to breakdown, but the engineers' brilliance lay in adapting them to wartime constraints. Components had to be scavenged, substitutes devised for materials in short supply, and complex systems assembled with minimal testing. Every success was hard-won, every failure a lesson that had to be learned quickly. This wasn't academic research, it was survival. And in that crucible of necessity, innovation flourished. The true genius of these unsung inventors was not only technical, but also practical. They understood the environment in which their creations would operate: unpredictable weather, human error, mechanical failure. They crafted systems resilient enough to withstand both the harsh elements and the chaos of war. It was one thing to detect aircraft theoretically. It was another to deliver actionable intelligence that fighter pilots could trust in the heat of combat. And here, the collaborative minds behind radar proved indispensable, turning abstract science into a tool that saved countless lives and defended a nation from annihilation. Consider the Battle of Britain, where the radar network first proved its mettle. From the tower masts on the southern coast, operators tracked formations of incoming bombers, feeding crucial information to RAF command. Without the data compiled by Wilkins and his colleagues, interception strategies would have been blind guesses. But with it, pilots took to the air equipped with knowledge they could rely upon. The impact was immediate and profound. The Luftwaffe lost the element of surprise, and the course of the war shifted. And yet, while the narrative of heroic RAF pilots dominates popular memory, the technicians and scientists behind radar remain ghosts in the story. These pioneers also had to overcome skepticism. Military officials were initially wary of investing in what seemed like experimental radio toys. Funding was limited, time was scarce, and pressure was immense. Every decision carried enormous risk, yet the engineers persisted. In cramped labs and isolated huts, they tested, recalibrated, and improved, often improvising with whatever materials they could find. The results were astonishing. Systems that could detect enemy aircraft miles away, providing early warnings that transformed air defense into a strategic advantage. It was ingenuity under pressure, a repeated theme of the unsung innovators of World War II. Radar's development also highlights the quiet persistence of teamwork. Watson may have had his name attached to the invention, but without the collective efforts of his assistants, the operators, the lab technicians, and the support of administrators, radar would have remained a theoretical concept. The technology itself is impressive, but the human story, the unseen hands that guided its creation, is far more compelling. These people worked in shadows, against deadlines that measured in minutes rather than months, with stakes that reached from city streets to the survival of a nation. The narrative that emerges here is one of recognition overdue. When you think about radar, it's easy to picture a few faces in history books or in black and white photographs. But the real story is larger, more intricate, and filled with quiet brilliance. Wilkins, the operators, the technicians, the engineers who never sought fame, all of them contributed to a legacy that outlived the war, shaping modern aviation, navigation systems, and even technologies we take for granted today, like weather tracking and traffic monitoring. Radar was never just a machine. It was a testament to human ingenuity, collaboration, and relentless determination. And the people who built it, so often relegated to footnotes, deserve to be remembered as much as the generals who issued the orders. They are the unsung geniuses whose ingenuity turned theory into reality, danger into defense, and obscurity into history, even if their names remain largely unknown. A heavy mist curls through the quiet lanes of Bletchley Park, muffling footsteps on gravel paths and dampening the distant clatter of horse-drawn carts delivering supplies. The manor house stands stoic, unremarkable in daylight, but within its walls a storm of intellect and urgency rages, a war waged not with bombs and bullets, but with ciphers, logic, and human ingenuity. This is where the unsung heroes of code-breaking earn their place in history, though few will ever know their names. Step into Hut 8, a narrow room buzzing with tension. Rows of desks are packed with men and women hunched over sheets of paper and typewriters. Each workstation is a tiny universe of secrecy. Paper tapes looped through primitive readers, chalkboards filled with cryptic symbols, and stacks of reports waiting for analysis. The air is electric, alive with purpose. Here, Alan Turing is present, brilliant and enigmatic. But the truth is that he is only part of a much larger, invisible network of minds working tirelessly to unravel the seemingly unbreakable Enigma codes. Among them are women like Mavis Beatty, whose quiet intelligence and meticulous attention to detail often go unnoticed by history, yet whose contributions are nothing short of revolutionary. Mavis leans over a cipher sheet, eyes scanning for patterns invisible to most. Her fingers move rapidly across the keys, calculating, hypothesizing, cross-checking. She pauses, recognizing a subtle flaw in the German naval code, one that could mean the difference between life and death for thousands of sailors at sea. A note is scribbled, an operator notified, and soon, intelligence derived from her insight will reroute convoys, prevent ambushes, and save lives. She will never stand on a podium, never give a speech about her achievement. Her reward is the knowledge that her work protected countless lives. This is the quiet heroism of the cryptographic mavericks. Every day at Bletchley Park is a race against time. German military communication is relentless, complex, and evolving. The operators and mathematicians cannot afford mistakes. Each breakthrough, no matter how small, has immediate consequences on the battlefield. Some nights, the workers toil without sleep, guided by dim lamplight, tracing the faintest clues in intercepted messages. The machines, Bomb, Colossus, and their ilk, hiss, clatter, and we're around them, their mechanical growls a constant reminder of both progress and urgency. But the real genius lies in the people who interpret, tweak, and push these machines beyond their intended limits. Without them, no algorithm alone could have cracked the codes in time. And yet, these figures are often obscured. When textbooks recount the victory over Enigma, Turing's brilliance is celebrated. Rightly so, but what of the dozens of other mathematicians, linguists, and codebreakers who poured every ounce of their energy into the task? How many women, denied the spotlight because of gender and societal norms, quietly contributed to breakthroughs that determined naval battles, protected supply lines, and ultimately shortened the war? Their names rarely appear in the history books, but their fingerprints are all over every intercepted message, every decrypted strategy, every life saved. Consider a night in 1942 when a particularly complex cipher threatens to allow a German U-boat wolf pack to ambush Allied convoys. A young female codebreaker, cross-referencing a routine German naval transmission, spots an inconsistency in the key rotation. Hours of painstaking calculation follow. By dawn, the critical intelligence reaches convoy commanders, who adjust course just in time to avoid destruction. Thousands of tons of supplies and hundreds of lives are spared, not by generals or admirals, but by a silent mind working in a dimly lit room hundreds of miles from the front lines. This is the invisible network of influence, the unsung genius whose work literally kept nations alive. Beyond individual brilliance, the cryptographic mavericks demonstrate the power of collaboration. Ideas bounce from desk to desk, from engineer to mathematician, from operator to analyst. A single insight, no matter how minor, can trigger a cascade of breakthroughs. And while secrecy and security demand that these contributions remain hidden, the cumulative effect is staggering. The Allies gain a technological advantage not because of superior numbers alone, but because of intelligence, accurate, timely, and actionable, produced by a hidden army of intellectuals. The story of Bletchley Park also underscores a larger truth about innovation in wartime. Progress is rarely linear, and credit is rarely fairly distributed. While history often simplifies events to a single name or moment, the reality is woven from countless threads of human ingenuity, courage, and persistence. Each unsung cryptographer, each meticulous operator, Each mind pushing a machine past its limits is part of a tapestry whose full scope is only now beginning to be appreciated. Today, when we navigate secure networks, send encrypted messages, or rely on complex algorithms to manage critical systems, we are standing on the shoulders of these unseen pioneers. Their genius was not performed for recognition. It was forged in necessity, in secrecy, under conditions that demanded perfection. And though history has often overlooked them, the world we inhabit owes as much to Mavis Beatty and her colleagues as it does to the celebrated figures whose names appear in print. The cryptographic mavericks teach us that innovation is rarely glamorous. It is patient, persistent, and often invisible. It thrives in quiet corners, behind closed doors, under the weight of immense pressure. And when it finally manifests, the impact can be monumental, altering the course of war, shaping the trajectory of technology, and redefining what is possible in human achievement. Dawn breaks over a fog-drenched European battlefield, where the smoke of distant artillery mingles with the sharp tang of antiseptic and mud. Canvas tents shiver in the cold morning breeze, their flaps clattering as nurses and medics move with urgent precision. Inside the largest tent, rows of wounded soldiers lie pale and silent, groaning softly as the scent of iodine and burned rubber fills the air. It's chaos disguised as order, a living testament to humanity's relentless struggle to preserve life amid destruction. And amid the clamor, some of the most revolutionary advancements of World War II are quietly taking shape, not in laboratories lined with medals and accolades, but in the hands of unsung scientists and medics working against time itself. A doctor kneels over a young infantryman, whose uniform is streaked with blood, the edges of a shrapnel wound glistening under the dim light. In his trembling hands, he holds a vial glowing faintly amber. Penicillin, the miracle drug whose production had been pushed to industrial scale by Howard Florey, Ernst Chain, and teams of chemists rarely acknowledged by history. Only months before, such an injury would have almost certainly been fatal. Now, the drug flows into the soldier's veins, halting the spread of infection with a precision and speed previously unimaginable. The scale of this innovation is staggering, from fragile laboratory cultures to mass production, from one sick patient to thousands saved across battlefields, all under the relentless pressure of war. The tent's periphery hums with additional quiet innovations. Stacks of carefully labeled blood bottles, insulated and refrigerated, are prepared for immediate transport. Blood banks, once a small and local affair, have been reimagined into mobile lifelines capable of delivering vital transfusions across battle-scarred Europe. Nurses and orderlies move with practiced efficiency, sliding bags into sleds and vehicles, calculating routes with a precision born from necessity. Every drop of blood that reaches a soldier's vein is a small victory over chaos, a testament to ingenuity forged in desperation. Further along the front, chemists work tirelessly in converted labs, synthesizing substitutes for critical materials cut off by enemy blockades. Synthetic rubber, nylon for parachutes, plastics for insulation, all born from necessity, all crafted in secrecy. The researchers work amid beakers, hissing furnaces, and swirling vapors, guided by meticulous notes and relentless curiosity. Their discoveries, initially meant to keep armies moving and planes flying, would ultimately find a home in everyday life. Tires, fabrics, household appliances, even medical devices. The materials, like the lives saved by penicillin and transfusions, carry invisible fingerprints of wartime urgency. Consider the medics who knelt under fire, hands steady despite bullets whistling overhead. Their kits, lightweight, efficient, and filled with newly developed wound dressings, synthetic tourniquets, and sulfa drugs, represent a revolution in battlefield medicine. Every innovation bought precious minutes that determined whether a soldier would survive the journey from frontline to field hospital. It is a stark reminder that war, while a destroyer, can also be a crucible for life-saving invention. And yet, these innovations often remained anonymous. while generals issued orders and strategists drew battle maps. The names of the scientists, nurses, and technicians rarely made it into newspapers. They worked in shadows, their brilliance overshadowed by headlines of combat and conquest. But their contributions were no less transformative. Florey and Chain's Penicillin, the engineers behind synthetic materials, the medics who perfected transfusion techniques, all of them quietly rewrote the rules of medicine and manufacturing. The scope of their legacy extends far beyond the battlefield. Modern hospitals, emergency response systems, and medical supply chains all owe their origins to these wartime pioneers. Blood banks today, from small clinics to global networks, are built on the operational models and refrigeration techniques developed under the pressure of necessity. Synthetic materials that once substituted for wartime shortages are now standard in clothing, electronics, and transportation. Even logistical planning, so critical to moving medicine, equipment, and supplies efficiently, draws directly from wartime operational research, a discipline shaped by the demand to optimize life-saving processes. Walking through a contemporary hospital, you can almost trace these innovations in the soft hum of heart monitors, the sterile efficiency of blood storage, the precise packaging and delivery of critical medications. Each element whispers the story of human ingenuity under duress. Similarly, in factories and research labs worldwide, materials and production techniques developed in those desperate years form the backbone of countless modern technologies. The ordinary conveniences surrounding us, stretchable fabrics, durable plastics, even the humble adhesive, bear the indelible imprint of wartime necessity. What emerges is a profound paradox. In the midst of humanity's darkest hours, driven by destruction, deprivation, and fear, the seeds of progress were sown. Innovation, often overlooked and uncredited, thrived in the margins, in tents, in laboratories, in workshops, and on muddy fields where survival demanded creativity. The unsung heroes of medical and material science may not have commanded armies or won battles with weapons alone, but they changed the war and the world just as decisively. And so, when you walk past a blood bank where clothing made of synthetic fibers, or marvel at medical treatments once unimaginable, remember the quiet figures behind these advancements. The doctors, nurses, chemists, and technicians who labored in secrecy are as essential to the story of World War II as any battlefield victory. Their brilliance was forged in adversity, their impact enduring, and their legacy woven into the very fabric of modern life. The sun dips low over a modern cityscape, its golden light reflecting off glass towers and the chrome of speeding cars, tracing a world almost unrecognizable from the chaos of the 1940s. Yet beneath this veneer of technological ease lies an invisible network of innovation, a lattice of ingenuity that owes everything to the unsung figures of World War II. Their breakthroughs, radar, cryptography, penicillin, synthetic materials, did not vanish with the guns and smoke of battle. Instead, they quietly evolved, infiltrating the structures, systems, and devices that define modern life. Every smartphone, every GPS signal, every medical treatment carries the fingerprints of inventors whose names history largely forgot. Walk through a bustling airport. Jets roar overhead, their turbine engines a direct descendant of the early prototypes tested under threat of enemy attack. The engineers who designed and perfected those engines worked in secrecy, under relentless pressure, ensuring not just speed and efficiency, but reliability under extremes. Today, passengers glide across continents in hours, hardly aware that the sleek technology enabling such journeys was born in fear and urgency. Every takeoff is a whisper of those unheralded geniuses whose insight transformed combat machinery into the backbone of global travel. Step inside a hospital with a quiet beep of monitors, the precise delivery of antibiotics, and the seamless storage of blood speak volumes about wartime innovation. Penicillin, once a scarce wartime resource painstakingly mass-produced by Howard Florey, Ernst Chain, and anonymous teams of chemists, is now a staple of modern medicine. Blood banks operate with techniques refined in the shadow of battle. Transfusion networks that cross cities and continents trace their lineage back to tents and field hospitals where improvisation became life-saving art. Every life preserved today is a living testament to their unheralded brilliance. Even the very data networks connecting our world carry echoes of wartime ingenuity. The distributed architecture of the internet, the redundancy of communication channels, and the algorithms ensuring reliable data transmission were inspired by the necessity to maintain command and control under siege. Engineers at Bletchley Park and later laboratories conceptualized resilience long before it became a cornerstone of digital infrastructure. Every email, every video call, every GPS update relies on principles first stressed by war: redundancy, precision, and the ability to perform under pressure. The materials surrounding us tell a similar story. Nylon stockings, once a substitute for silk parachutes, plastics, initially created to replace scarce metals and rubber, synthetic rubbers, designed to keep vehicles and aircraft operational despite supply blockades, all emerge from urgent necessity. Today, they permeate clothing, electronics, infrastructure, and transportation. The ordinary objects in our homes, often taken for granted, are heirlooms of wartime creativity, testament to the ingenuity of anonymous chemists and engineers who never sought fame but demanded results. History often distills innovation into singular names and headlines, but the truth is more intricate, more human. It was a collective endeavor, a network of quiet brilliance thriving in labs, tents, and workshops across continents. From the hum of radar sets in southern England to the meticulous calculations of cryptographers in dimly lit huts, from the first fermenters producing penicillin to chemists developing synthetic materials in makeshift laboratories, the war was a crucible of collaboration. Individual genius mattered, yes, but so did the countless unseen hands that shaped, tested, and perfected every idea. These are the unsung heroes, the quiet architects of progress. And their legacy is not confined to technology. They reshaped our understanding of problem-solving, of resilience under pressure, and of the power of innovation born from necessity. Modern science, engineering, medicine, and logistics all carry traces of the collaborative, high-stakes ingenuity that characterized their work. Lessons learned in the chaos of war, rapid iteration, resourcefulness, interdisciplinary teamwork inform how breakthroughs are pursued today, from medical research to space exploration. As you navigate the world around you, take a moment to consider the invisible threads connecting the present to those years of urgency, risk, and brilliance. The smartphone in your hand, the efficient flight above clouds, the medical care quietly sustaining life. They are more than conveniences. They are the living legacy of men and women whose intellect, perseverance, and courage shaped the modern era. They remind us that even amid destruction, humanity is capable of creating life-saving, world-changing wonders. The final truth of their story is simple, yet profound. History often forgets names, but it never forgets impact. These unsung geniuses of World War II may not have commanded armies, appeared on newsreels, or written their own biographies. Yet through their innovations, they molded the fabric of modern life. Every device, every medical advance, every engineered system is a silent echo of their brilliance. A reminder that progress often comes from the margins, from those working in quiet dedication when the world is watching elsewhere. And so, when a microwave hums to life, when radar tracks weather and flight, when penicillin saves a life, and when synthetic materials support industries across the globe, remember, this is the enduring legacy of uncelebrated brilliance. A legacy forged in the shadows, amplified in action, and still shaping the world in ways visible and invisible today. The unsung inventors of World War II did not merely influence history. They became the scaffolding upon which the modern world was built. Their story is a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the quiet, transformative power of genius working behind the scenes.